What do you think are the chances of discovering your wife's infidelity while helping your best friend catch his cheating wife? 1,000,000 to 1? Unthinkable? Unbelievable? That's what I thought. But it happened. To me. And it shattered my life into pieces I'm still trying to pick up. So, here's how it started. And trust me, you won't believe where it ended. It was a blazing hot Friday afternoon in Dallas, the kind where the sun bakes the pavement and the air shimmers like a mirage. I was in my garage, elbow deep in grease, wrestling with the alternator on my old '96 Chevy Silverado. Country music crackled from the radio, and the smell of cut grass from the neighbor's lawn mixed with hot asphalt. That's when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened the door to see Mike Simmons. The moment I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. Mike isn't a guy who cracks easy. We've been best friends since high school, 2 decades of fishing trips, busted knuckles, and beers on the back porch. He was my best man, and I was his. I know the man inside and out. But that day, his face was pale, his jaw tight, and his eyes had that hollow look you get when the ground's been ripped from under you. "Mike," I said, my gut twisting. "What's going on?" His voice came low and raw. "I think Emily's cheating on me." Now, let me tell you something about Mike and Emily. Married 12 years, 2 kids, Mason and Lily. They had that picture-perfect life, a beautiful house in Highland Park, matching SUVs, summer trips to Destin. Emily taught yoga and organized every PTA event under the sun. She wasn't the type you'd ever suspect. But if I've learned one thing from years as a cop and PI, it's that the ones you least suspect are often the ones hiding the most. Mike's hands were shaking, his knuckles white from gripping his phone. "She's been acting off. Always on her phone. Late from work. Last night, she said she was having dinner with Katie." He paused, his throat tight. "But Katie posted from Fort Worth. Emily wasn't with her." I felt the tension roll off him like a storm cloud. I've seen that look before, in interrogation rooms, right before a guy breaks down. "You sure you want to go down this road, Mike?" I asked. "You might not like what you find." His eyes burned into mine. "I have to know, man. I need the truth." I nodded once. "Then let's find out together." Here's the thing. I wasn't just his buddy offering advice. I was trained for this. I spent 12 years on the Dallas PD, 8 of those in vice and narcotics. I've tailed dealers through Oak Cliff and busted pimps in Deep Ellum. I know how to follow without being seen and how to catch people doing exactly what they don't want to be caught doing. After my knee blew out during a foot chase in Bishop Arts, I hung up the badge and started working as a private investigator. These days, I mostly caught insurance fraudsters and wandering spouses. But this wasn't just a case. This was Mike. I went to my garage and opened the trunk of my main workhorse, my 2017 Ford Explorer, dark gray, tinted windows. I call her the Ghost because she blends into traffic like a shadow. I've spent years customizing her with everything I need for surveillance. Dash cams front and rear, recording every angle. GPS tracking to log every move. Scanner app hooked to local police frequencies. A mounted Nikon Z50 camera with a 250mm zoom lens for those long-range shots. And a digital voice recorder, because people say the damnedest things when they think no one's listening. Mike slid into the passenger seat, his jaw tight. "So, how do we do this?" I fired up the engine, the Explorer humming to life with a soft growl. "By the book. If she's innocent, we'll know. If she's not, you'll have the proof." The first stop was her office, Larson and Company Financial, a fancy glass tower off McKinney Avenue in uptown Dallas. She told Mike she was working late, so that's where we'd start. We parked 2 blocks away under a shady oak, the Dallas skyline towering above us. Glass, steel, and heat waves shimmering off the asphalt. The air conditioner blasted, but the tension inside the car was ice cold. I pulled out my Nikon and focused on the front entrance. Now we wait. Minutes turned into an hour. The sun dipped low, casting the streets in gold and shadow. I watched suits and ties trickle out, some grabbing Ubers, others hitting the bars for happy hour. But no Emily. Mike's knee bounced nervously. "You sure she's still in there?" I glanced at the building's underground garage entrance. "She drives that white Lexus GX 460, right?" Mike nodded. The garage exit stayed empty. She's still inside, I said. Then, at 7:43 p.m., the glass doors opened. Emily stepped out. Mike stiffened. There she is. Now, I've tailed a lot of people. I've seen the guilty, the clueless, and everything in between. But what struck me about Emily wasn't what she was doing. It was how she looked. She wasn't coming out like someone who'd pulled a 12-hour shift. No rumpled blouse. No tired eyes. She was dolled up. Silky blouse, fitted skirt, heels that clicked sharp on the pavement. Her hair, makeup, perfect. But here's the kicker. She didn't leave alone. The glass doors opened again, and out stepped a man. Mike sucked in a sharp breath. Who the hell is that? The guy was smooth, mid-40s, suit tailored to perfection, a Rolex flashing under his cuff. You could smell the ego from the parking lot. And he was walking right next to Emily. Close. Familiar. But what made my blood run cold was the way she smiled at him. Mike's voice was tight as a wire. That's Trevor Clark, her boss. Met him at their Christmas party. His hands clenched. He shook my hand, man. He stood in my kitchen. I poured him a drink. Trevor opened the passenger door of a sleek, black BMW 7 Series, and without a moment's hesitation, Emily slipped inside. Mike's voice shook. She told me she was working late. I felt his pain. I did. But I kept my voice calm. Okay, now we follow. I eased the Explorer into traffic, headlights off, trailing them from 2 cars back. The GPS tracker logged every turn. The dash cams recorded every move. Mike's phone buzzed. He glanced down and his face darkened. It was a text from Emily. Working late. Babe, don't wait up. I love you. Mike's hand shook as he showed me the screen. His voice cracked, thick with hurt. She's lying right now. I said nothing. Because what was there to say? I thought I was just helping my best friend catch his wife cheating. I thought this would be simple. Hard, but simple. But I had no idea that this road was about to lead straight through my own life. Because by chasing his truth, I was about to uncover a nightmare of my own. The low hum of the engine and the rhythmic clicking of the turn signal were the only sounds in the cabin of my 2017 Ford Explorer as we trailed the black BMW 7 Series westbound on Interstate 30. The Dallas skyline shrank behind us, fading into the dusky horizon. Neon billboards flickered by, advertising everything from injury lawyers to barbecue joints. The BMW kept a steady pace, weaving through traffic with confidence. Trevor Clark drove like a man with nowhere to hide and nothing to fear. Typical. Guys like him, wealthy, powerful, they never think the rules apply to them. The highway signs flashed. Fort Worth, 18 miles. The BMW signaled and took exit 13 onto Spur 280, the elevated expressway leading into Fort Worth's downtown. The city lights sparkled ahead, glass towers standing tall against the twilight sky. I eased the Explorer back, staying 2 cars behind. Traffic was light, but not empty. A few late commuters and rideshares kept us camouflaged. Mike's voice broke the silence. Why Fort Worth? He muttered, half to himself. Her office is in Dallas. She's supposed to be working late. I kept my eyes on the road. Neutral ground. Less chance someone they know will see them. His jaw tightened, and his knee bounced. This bastard. He was in my house, man. Ate my food. Joked with my kids. His voice was raw, cracking under the pressure. I glanced at him briefly. I know, Mike. But don't lose it now. Stay sharp. He nodded. His lips pressed into a hard line. The BMW made a sudden right, turning off onto North Main Street, passing the old stockyard arches. I followed from a distance, careful to stay out of their mirrors. A minute later, the familiar neon glow of Maverick's Lounge lit up the windshield. A classic Texas roadhouse with a weathered wooden facade, a neon cowboy tipping his hat, and a gravel lot that smelled like beer and cigarettes. I pulled into a spot across the street, under the cover of a dark oak tree. The dash cam recorded everything, the entrance, the lot, and their car. Trevor's BMW rolled to a stop near the side entrance. The driver's door opened, and he stepped out, confident, slick, his tailored suit sharp under the yellow glow of the lot lights. Then Emily. She stepped out gracefully, tucking her hair behind her ear. She looked happy, not nervous, Not rushed. Happy. Mike's breath hitched. She told me she was in the office, he muttered. I gripped his arm before he could do something stupid. Don't. Not yet. Watch. Trevor placed his hand on her lower back, casual, familiar. The kind of touch a man has when he knows he can. Emily didn't flinch. She leaned into it, her body language as loud as a confession. And then, the final blow. She turned to him and smiled, soft and warm, before he brushed a kiss across her cheek. Mike's whole body went rigid, his fists curling so tight I thought he might break his own fingers. His voice, low and shaking. I knew it, he growled. His throat sounded like gravel, tight with hurt. That lying, he cut himself off, his breathing shallow and sharp. I kept my voice steady, the calm to his storm. I know, man, but we need more. This isn't enough. You want to nail her in court? You'll need more than a blurry shot from a parking lot. He was boiling, but he nodded. His eyes stayed glued to them as they walked inside, the wooden doors swinging shut behind them. I grabbed my Nikon with the 250mm lens, zoomed in, and started snapping photos. Entrance shots, car license plates, timestamps. All of it. Then I turned to Mike. We're going inside. But listen to me. You do not confront her here. Not tonight. You hold it in. We get proof. That's the mission. His jaw flexed, his voice tight. Yeah, I got it. The smell hit us the second we walked through the doors. Stale beer, fried food, and the sweet burn of whiskey. Maverick's Lounge was classic Texas. Mounted longhorns on the walls, neon beer signs, and a jukebox crooning George Strait. The place was buzzing. Weekend crowd, mostly locals in jeans and boots. Mike and I slipped into a high-backed booth in the corner, half hidden from the main floor, but with a perfect line of sight to the bar. I ordered a soda, Mike a water. Neither of us trusted ourselves with liquor tonight. My camera, hidden in a small black sling bag, had its lens peeking just enough for a clean shot. And there they were. Trevor and Emily had found a cozy spot at the bar. Close. Too close for colleagues. His arm brushed hers, and she didn't move away. She laughed at something he said, her head tilting back, her hand brushing his arm. Mike's hands gripped the edge of the table so hard it creaked. His voice was a whisper but sharp as broken glass. That's how she used to laugh with me. I kept snapping photos, every smile, every touch. Then Trevor leaned in, his mouth close to her ear, and she smiled, that kind of smile. The one that made Mike's breath hitch like he'd been gut-punched. Suddenly, Emily pulled out her phone and glanced down. A second later, Mike's phone buzzed on the table. A text. From her. Emily. How's your night, babe? Don't wait up. I'm buried in paperwork. Mike stared at the screen, his face hollow. She's lying to me. Right now. His voice cracked on the last word. I felt the heat of his anger from across the table. His leg was bouncing hard, his breath ragged. I set a hand on his arm, my voice low and firm. Don't lose it. Don't blow the cover. We're almost there. The bartender brought Trevor a glass of bourbon and Emily a margarita with a salted rim. She sipped it, her lips lingering on the straw. Then she slid it toward him. Trevor smirked and took a sip from the same spot. I felt Mike stiffen. His voice, barely audible, was raw. She won't even share a damn drink with me. Says it's gross. The jukebox switched to something slower, Chris Stapleton's Tennessee whiskey. Couples drifted onto the dance floor, boots scuffing against the worn wood. And then, Trevor offered his hand, and Emily took it. Mike's whisper cracked like glass. No. I clicked the shutter, catching the moment as they moved to the floor. Trevor's hand slipped to the small of her back, familiar, intimate. Her body folded into his, and they swayed, close and slow. It was everything Mike didn't want to see, everything he needed to see. His voice was shaking, barely holding on. This is enough, right? Tell me this is enough. I kept snapping. It's plenty for a confrontation. But if you want the court to bury her in the divorce, we need more. Something undeniable. His fists trembled on the table. She's making me watch this, man. His voice broke. She chose him. I put the camera down and looked him in the eyes. I know, but you're not alone, Mike. You're not going through this alone. The song ended. They returned to the bar, closer than ever. I packed the camera up. We got enough for tonight. Let's go before you do something you can't take back. Mike's face was stone. I won't give her the satisfaction. We slipped out through the side entrance and back into the Explorer. The air inside felt heavy, thick with pain and anger. Mike didn't say a word, his eyes burning holes through the dashboard. The dash cam blinked steadily, capturing his devastation in cold, silent frames. I gripped the wheel, my voice low and certain. We'll finish this, Mike. One way or another. His voice came, hoarse and broken. Yeah, let's finish it. And in that moment, sitting beside my best friend, his heart shattered, his world burning, I had no idea. My own world was about to catch fire too. The house felt hollow that night, the kind of quiet that makes your skin itch. Mike told me later that something had been gnawing at him all day, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Emily was packing for her team-building retreat in Houston, 2 days of workshops, seminars, and networking with her colleagues at Larson & Company. She'd kissed Mike on the cheek earlier, all smiles and chatter about her tight schedule and how she probably wouldn't have time to call much. But then, she slipped. Mike was in the hallway when he heard her. Emily in the kitchen, her voice low but urgent. No, not the hotel. I told you, I'm not staying at Magnolia. It's the Sunrise Inn. Room 214. Just be there on time. Mike froze, his heart hammering. The Sunrise Inn? That wasn't where the retreat was. She ended the call quickly, but her phone buzzed again, lighting up on the counter with a notification. A name flashed on the screen. Trevor Clark, rooms ready. Team building, remember? Winking face. Mike's stomach dropped. His throat went dry. Emily's heels clicked back into the room. She scooped up her phone without noticing him and smiled. Hey babe, she said breezily. Just confirming my hotel for tomorrow. Mike swallowed the burning acid rising in his chest. He didn't confront her. Not then, but something inside him broke. Now, we were on the road, barreling down, the Houston skyline still a blur in the distance. The tension inside my Ford Explorer was thick enough to choke on. Mike hadn't said much since we left Dallas. His jaw was tight, his hands knotted on his lap, and his eyes locked on the road ahead like he could burn a hole through it. She wasn't even going to the damn retreat, he muttered suddenly, his voice raw and tight. All those lies about seminars and workshops, his fists clenched. It was all for him. I kept my eyes on the road, the Explorer humming steady beneath us. I believe you, I said, my voice low but certain. And we're gonna catch them. Together. The highway signs flashed. Houston 22 miles. We passed through a sea of headlights and neon, billboards for personal injury lawyers, and steakhouses flickering past the windshield. The Sunrise Inn wasn't far from the highway, just past a gas station and a row of pawn shops. Its neon sign flickered weakly, casting a dull green glow across the cracked pavement. The lot was half empty, mostly work trucks and old sedans. A place where no one asked questions. I killed the engine and let the Explorer roll into a dark corner beneath a busted streetlight. The dash cams were already recording, front and rear. I reached for my Nikon Z50, the zoom lens ready. Mike's voice was a growl, barely contained. You see her car? I scanned the lot, then there it was. A white Lexus, parked right in front of room 214. Mike's breath hitched. That's hers. His hand moved to the door handle, but I snapped out an arm, my voice hard and cold. No. His head whipped toward me, his eyes blazing. Don't you dare tell me to sit here. I locked eyes with him, every word sharp. We record first. You want her to walk away from this with nothing? You want her to spin a story later? Then you need proof. Solid, undeniable proof. His chest heaved, his fists shaking with rage. But then, through clenched teeth, he muttered, Fine, let's finish it. We moved silently across the lot, the gravel crunching soft beneath our shoes. I felt the hot, sticky night air clinging to my skin, thick with the stench of cigarettes and old motor oil. The blinds in room 214 were cheap and yellowed, bent just enough to leave a sliver of a view. I lifted the Nikon, adjusting the lens. Mike's phone camera was already rolling as he gripped it. Inside, there they were, Emily. Trevor. My finger hovered on the shutter, and I felt my stomach drop. Trevor was seated, his shirt loose, his expression full of that unbearable smugness. Emily stood close, too close for anything but the truth. Her body language, her soft smile, the ease in her posture. It was intimate. Mike's voice cracked beside me, raw and hollow. That's my wife. My camera clicked softly, again and again, capturing it all. Then, the shadows in the room shifted. Emily's voice floated through the thin glass, teasing, amused. So, Trevor, she purred, who's the lucky guest? Trevor's smirk deepened, his voice full of that unbearable arrogance. Oh, he chuckled, you'll see. I love surprises. I swear to God, said Mike. I grabbed his arm hard, my voice sharp and cold. Not yet. His body shook, the raw hatred in his voice barely contained. Whoever's walking through that door, his voice dropped, venomous and final. I hope they rot with her. The camera kept rolling. The Explorer's dash cam blinked, recording every second. The seconds felt like hours. The air felt like it was made of glass, thin, fragile, ready to shatter. We thought we were ready, but we had no idea. No idea what was coming through that door. I kept the lens steady, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had seen things, more than I could ever count, in my years as a cop. But this was personal. Then, the latch clicked, the motel door opened, and someone else walked in. I felt my body lock, every muscle seizing as the air in my lungs vanished. Because I knew that face. I knew that face. The world around me went silent. The traffic, the bass, the hum of the lights, everything, gone. The camera nearly slipped from my hands. My heart pounded so violently, I thought my ribs might crack from it. My mouth felt like sandpaper as I heard myself whisper, raw and broken, Sarah? Mike's head snapped toward me, his brow twisted in confusion. What? Who? His voice died mid-sentence. His eyes locked on the window, and his face, it drained, white as a ghost. His voice cracked, jagged and disbelieving. No, that. His throat closed around the words. His eyes turned to me, wide and stricken. That's, his voice barely made it. That's Sarah? I felt my whole chest collapse. My voice came out barely a whisper, raw and hollow. Yeah, I said, the word like broken glass. That's my wife. The camera trembled in my hands, but I couldn't lower it. I couldn't tear my eyes away. Inside, Trevor turned to Sarah. His grin was smug, dripping arrogance. Told you I had a surprise, he chuckled, his voice oozing with that unbearable confidence. Emily, sprawled across the bed, propped herself on her elbows, and let out a wicked little laugh. Didn't know you liked to share, she purred. The bile rose hot in my throat, burning and bitter. My vision tunneled, the edges of the world going dark and narrow. Mike's voice came, low and broken, like something shattered inside him. What the hell is this? My stomach twisted so hard it felt like I was going to be sick. I couldn't breathe, but my hands, they stayed steady. The camera never stopped. Because this was what we came for. Trevor ran his fingers through his hair, that self-satisfied smirk glued to his face. Guess tonight's full of surprises, he said casually, like he wasn't detonating lives with every word. Sarah, my Sarah, the mother of my kids, laughed softly and touched his arm. The crack inside me splintered wider, and something in me, something cold and sharp, took over. My voice, a dead whisper. You lying. You damn liar. Mike's hands were shaking so hard the phone nearly slipped. She your wife, with them? His voice was wild, raw, barely holding together. I felt something inside me harden. My voice was flat, stripped of everything but cold steel. Yeah, I said. With them. Emily's voice floated through the window, syrupy and amused. So, Trevor, she teased, who's next on your guest list? Another little surprise? Trevor's eyes sparkled with that unbearable smugness. Oh, he said, the night's just getting started. Mike's breathing turned ragged, and I felt his body coil like a spring about to snap. His voice shook with volcanic fury. I'll kill them. I grabbed his arm, hard. My voice cut sharp and cold. No, not here. Not like this. His eyes burned into mine, wild and desperate. They. I squeezed tighter. We finished this. But not here. The camera kept rolling. Every word. Every smirk. Every betrayal. Inside, they laughed. Outside, we broke. My hands felt cold. My heart thundered, and my whole world, collapsed. The air felt like broken glass in my lungs. Mike's voice came, low and jagged. What do we do now? My voice, dead, hollow, and final.
Now.
I lowered the camera, the red light of the recording still blinking. The pressure inside me felt like a live wire, snapping and sparking, seconds from setting the whole world on fire. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, drowning out everything else. The distant hum of the highway, the faint thump of the jukebox from the motel bar down the lot, the cicadas screaming from the trees. But what I did hear, clear as a gunshot, was Mike. His breathing, fast and jagged, like a man being crushed from the inside. His voice, low and sharp, seething with volcanic rage. I'm not waiting. His body moved before I could stop him. A blur of motion, then crash. The door to room 214 exploded inward with a deafening bang as Mike's boot splintered the flimsy lock. The cheap brass chain snapped, and the door slammed back against the wall, rattling the entire room. The smell hit me first. Stale air, cheap cologne, and something sharp, bitter. And then chaos. Trevor shot up from the couch, his smirk vanishing, eyes wide. What the? Emily screamed, scrambling for the edge of the bed, her face flushed, her hand yanking the rumpled sheet around her. Mike? But I didn't see them. I saw her. Sarah, my wife. My body locked, every muscle seizing, every nerve firing. The room spun, but my vision tunneled, and all I could see was her. Her eyes. Wide. Terrified. Guilty. My voice came from somewhere low and cold, shaking from the force of holding back something monstrous. You? My throat burned.
With him.
Her face twisted into horror. Oh my God, she gasped, her voice cracking, her hands coming up like she could push the moment away, push me away. But I didn't let her finish. The phone in my hand, still recording, felt like a lead weight, but it stayed steady, the red light blinking, capturing everything. My voice, low and raw, ripped from my chest through gritted teeth. Have you been leading a double life behind my back? My hand shook, but the lens stayed locked on her face.
With him.
Trevor, ever the smug bastard, laughed. Hey, he said, his voice dripping with that unbearable arrogance. Don't be so old-fashioned. We're all adults here. The cold in my chest exploded. But before I could move, Mike's voice broke the room. Wait, he roared, his voice shattered and raw. All three of you. His words stopped dead in his throat, his eyes flaring wide, wild with realization. His gaze snapped from Trevor to Emily, to Sarah. His voice, thick, ragged, full of something that sounded like death. You all planned this together? Emily's mouth opened, her voice shaking.
Mike.
But his voice roared over hers. What the hell kind of people are you? Sarah, my Sarah? Her voice broke, stumbling and desperate. It's not. But I felt something inside me snap. My hand was shaking so bad I thought I dropped the phone. But my voice, low, hollow, carved from ice and fire, stopped her cold. Don't. I felt the heat, the agony, the betrayal burning through my chest. But my voice was like a blade. It's exactly what it looks like. Her mouth trembled, words ready to fall, excuses, please, but they died on her lips. Because I knew. Trevor chuckled, folding his arms, his smirk back in full force. Man, he drawled, you guys are so uptight. He glanced at Mike, his eyes dancing with mockery. You should thank me, pal. I opened her eyes. Hell, Mike snapped. Mike lunged forward, his rage breaking free. Trevor stumbled back, crashing into the nightstand, glass shattering, the lamp hitting the floor with a heavy thud. A low groan followed as he clutched his face, his smirk wiped clean. Mike's voice. A raw, shredded thing. You opened nothing, you piece of... Emily shrieked, her voice shrill and shaking. Mike, stop! But Mike's eyes, they weren't on her. They locked on Sarah. His voice, low and sharp, the edges frayed with something that could barely be called human. You knew. Sarah's voice, high and panicked. No. Mike's voice roared, shattering through her excuse. You knew? You were part of this? Her face, white as a sheet, her lips quivering, her hands shaking, but no denial. And then, she looked at me, her eyes, full of terror, and something worse, regret, but not the right kind. Not the kind you get when you lose something you love. The kind you get when you get caught. The world felt like it had been ripped from under me. I felt my knees weaken, felt the fire in my chest swallow everything. But my voice stayed cold. You. My throat was raw, my voice barely human. My eyes burned into hers. You did this to me. Her lip trembled. Please. Trevor, still holding his bruised jaw, laughed from the floor. Come on, buddy, he wheezed. What did you expect? She's clearly been bored with you for... My phone, still recording, caught everything. Mike turned on him, his voice blazing. Shut your damn mouth. But my voice sliced through the room like a blade through bone. I trusted you. Sarah, my wife. Her eyes, wide. She gasped, her voice breaking. I didn't. My voice raw, burning. You did. I felt my chest heaving, felt my hands shaking. But the phone stayed steady. Her voice cracked into pieces. I'm so sorry. But I felt something die. The camera caught it all. Mike's voice came, low, broken, shaking with something that had no name. What are you? The room, the air, the world, collapsed. Glass, shattered on the floor. The lamp, flickering in the corner. The blinds, swaying from the night breeze. But the damage, the real damage, had already been done. The phone, still recording, capturing it all. Emily, Trevor, Sarah, and us. The end of everything, burning. The next morning felt unreal, like I was trapped in some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The sun was already burning over Dallas, but the light felt cold. I hadn't closed my eyes all night. Couldn't. My body was running on fumes, my mind on fire. The smell of stale coffee clung to my shirt from the gas station where I'd stopped, but I couldn't taste it. All I could feel was the icy weight in my chest. I pulled into the lot of Kingsley and Associates, a stone front building on Oaklawn Avenue, the kind of place where the parking spaces are filled with German cars and everyone walks around with a Bluetooth earpiece and an iced coffee. But I wasn't here for pleasantries. I was here for war. Inside, the receptionist, sharp suit, bright smile, barely got a good morning out before I said, I'm here for Robert Kingsley. He's expecting me. Her smile flickered when she saw my face. Something in my eyes must have told her I wasn't here for a friendly chat. She picked up the phone without another word. Mr. Kingsley, your 9 o'clock is here. Minutes later, I was sitting in a leather chair across from Robert Kingsley, my lawyer. He was a sharp man. Silver hair, cold eyes, and a voice that could slice through concrete. I'd heard he was a shark in the courtroom, and that's exactly what I needed. Without a word, I slid my phone across his polished oak desk. The screen was still lit, the video paused at a frame I could barely stomach to look at. My voice felt hollow, cold. Everything you need is on there. Kingsley picked up the phone, his eyes narrowing as he tapped play. The room filled with the sounds, the voices, the laughter, the confrontation. The heat of it all burned from the tiny screen. I watched his face harden as the scene unfolded. No questions, no interruptions, just a slow tightening of his jaw and a glint of something sharp and lethal in his eyes. When the footage ended, he placed the phone down carefully. His voice, when it came, was a low, steady thing. With this, he said grimly, you'll get everything. I felt my hands curl into fists against my knees. Good. 2 weeks later, the courtroom smelled like old wood and tension. Polished floors, rows of stiff-backed benches, and the stale air of battles fought and lost. The seal of Dallas County Family Court glinted from behind the judge's bench, a silent reminder that this place didn't care about feelings, only facts. Sarah sat across from me, her lawyer whispering into her ear. She wouldn't look at me. Not once. I had nothing to say to her. The judge, a stern woman with steel-gray hair and a voice sharp as a gavel, called the room to order. Her eyes skimmed through the case file, but I saw the flicker of something behind them as she reached the section marked Exhibit A, video evidence. Robert Kingsley stood smoothly, his voice cutting through the courtroom like cold wind. "Your Honor," he said, "the footage speaks for itself. My client has provided undeniable proof of infidelity and moral misconduct within the marital home. In light of this, we request full custody of the children and sole possession of the family residence." Sarah's lawyer, some slick-talking suit named Daniel Roth, stood and tried to argue emotional distress, unfair invasion of privacy, and marital reconciliation attempts. The judge cut him down with a single look. "Mr. Roth," she said sharply, "the law is clear. The evidence is damning." The gavel fell, and so did everything else. Full custody of Tommy and Ellie, mine. The house on Cedar Hill, mine. Sarah? She got nothing. The judge's words were final. This court finds in favor of the petitioner. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to the father, with supervised visitation for the mother. The marital residence will remain with the petitioner. The respondent is awarded no claim to the property. I felt the room go silent, the air heavy with the finality of it. My heart thundered, but I kept my face cold, my hands still. Sarah's face. Her face crumbled. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes searched mine, maybe for regret, maybe for mercy. She found none. Her lawyer muttered something, probably about appeals, but I saw it in her eyes. She knew. It was over. The bailiff's voice broke the silence. "Court is adjourned." The gavel cracked. The sound of finality. The sun blazed down on the concrete steps as I walked out, the heat pressing against my skin. But inside I felt cold. My lawyer shook my hand firmly. "It's done," he said. "She won't take your kids. She won't take your home." I nodded. "Thanks, Kingsley." His eyes glinted. "You came to me for victory. You got it." He turned and walked toward his car, his polished shoes tapping against the stone. I stood there for a moment, the courthouse towering behind me, the weight of it all pressing down. The fight was over, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a graveyard. Mike didn't waste a second. With my footage backing his case, his lawyer tore through Emily's defense like a chainsaw through rotten wood. I sat in on his hearing. Emily tried tears, apologies, even begging. But Mike sat there like a stone. The gavel fell, hard and cold. Full custody to Mike. The house Mike's. Emily? Nothing but her shame. I saw her face break when the judgment came down. I felt nothing. Mike walked out of that courtroom without a word. We met outside. 2 men, 2 friends, with everything in ruins. The dust had settled, but it didn't feel like victory. More like the smoldering silence after a wildfire. Everything burned, nothing whole. The house on Cedar Hill, my house, felt hollow. It was just me, Tommy and Ellie, and the echoes of a life that wasn't coming back. The kids didn't fully understand what had happened, but they felt the cracks. Kids always do. I sat them down, kept it simple, kept it true. Mom made some mistakes, I told them. But we're gonna be okay. Because we're together. They cried. I cried. And then, slowly, we started healing. Sarah? She tried. Tried to reach me. Tried apologies. Tried guilt. But her words were like ashes. There was nothing left for her to burn. The only thing I told her was this. You didn't just break a vow. You broke us. And I was done. Mike? He and I sat together on my porch one night, a couple of beers between us. His fight was over too. Emily out of his life, his kids safe with him. He broke the silence. Man, I thought this was just my nightmare. Never thought it'd take you down too. I shook my head, my voice rough but steady. You saved me from finding out too late. He met my eyes, tired, hollow, but still my brother. No, he said. We saved each other. The road ahead felt long and lonely, but I had two reasons to keep walking. Tommy and Ellie. They were my whole world now, and I wasn't about to fail them. So, I built something new. I took the wreckage, the pain, the loss, the truth, and I turned it into purpose. Lone Star Investigations. I started taking cases, people who felt that gnawing doubt, people who needed the truth, people like I had been. Because if there's one thing I learned, the truth always finds a way out. And when it does, it changes everything. Forever. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you confront them the same way or handle it differently? If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.